Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had someone ask a question, and they asked, how important is feeling the contraction in a muscle? And that was in a video about muscle growth, so I'm going to assume he means in order to stimulate muscle growth. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's delve into this topic. Now, this is going to be a complex topic, and I'm going to present a line of logic for you guys a lot of people haven't considered, because it's something people don't think about when it comes to this feeling a muscle squeeze, feeling it contract. How important is it to feel that muscle? But it's going to make sense to you when I explain it. It's going to make a lot of sense, I promise you. Now, how important is it? It could range anywhere from being fairly important all the way to being completely pointless and meaningless and having no value at all. So the answer is really going to depend upon the context of the situation, the context of the exercise. Now, when it comes to feeling a muscle, feeling a specific muscle, this is something that has caused certain people out there to believe that isolation movements are automatically better than big compound movements for developing specific muscles. Why? Because they feel it more in that muscle. But you know what the truth is? If you take any given compound movement versus any given isolation movement, sometimes the compound movement is better at developing that muscle. It stimulates it more. Sometimes the isolation movement stimulates it more. It's not actually a one-size-fits-all. Not every single compound is going to be the best exercise to build a muscle, and not every single muscle is going to be worked better automatically by an isolation than one of the better compounds for it. You've got to put that in perspective. But you almost always have the ability to feel the contraction more on an isolation movement than you do the compound. And that's not going to make a lot of sense to people in light of what I just said. Well, if it's sometimes one, sometimes the other, why can you always feel it more on the isolation movement? Well, stop and think about that for a minute. You guys ever growing up or had a joke played on you or something, you told someone you had a headache or whatever and they stomped on your foot? Or you hit your own foot? You know, because sometimes someone's done that and said, well, you feel your headache now? And of course your answer is no, because the foot hurts more than the head. You forget all about that head stimulation, but if you also had a headache or you had a finger that hurt or something else and you hit your foot really hard, a toe, you feel the toe, you forget all about the other pain momentarily. You forget about it for a little while. Let me ask you the question. Did that pain or that injury go away? Meaning if you had a stubbed finger that had been hurting, or a bruise on it, or a pulled muscle in your hand, did that pulled muscle or that bruise go away because you hit your toe? Was it reduced even slightly? Was the cause of your headache removed? Maybe your headache was caused by dehydration. Actually, over half of headaches are caused by not getting enough water. It's a sign of dehydration. Did that dehydration go away? Did that electrolyte imbalance go away? Did maybe a tight muscle in your neck that was causing your headache, did it go away because you hit your toe? Was it any less the cause of it? Was the cause removed in any way? No. That pulled muscle didn't go away in your hand. That bruise didn't go away. It wasn't physically affected any differently. But you felt the new stimulus of the toe or your foot being hit, didn't you? Why is that? Because that's the one the brain chose to notice. What you find when it comes to certain things like contractions, pain, things like that, your brain only registers in your conscious mind at the forefront of it one or two of those stimuluses at any given time. All right? It doesn't mean that the other stimuluses went away. It doesn't mean that they're gone. It just means that's the one that your brain registers. So let me ask you a question on that. If you are doing a weighted chin-up and going all the way down, getting from a dead hang, stretching your lats, stretching your biceps, and you do a chin-up all the way to the top where your chin goes over the bar, and you do 5 or 6 of those and pretty much hit failure with whatever weight you're using, whether it's a body weight, a weight hanging, or whatever, and you feel your lats cramping on it, did your biceps get worked any less because of that? Both muscles got worked through their full range of motion. Both of them got worked in an exercise that we have a lot of EMG data showing they are very, very powerful exercises for those muscles, meaning every single study looking at the biomechanics and looking at muscle activity and nervous system activity recruiting muscle fibers has shown consistently that the chin-up is one of the best exercises in the entire world for both the biceps and the lats. All right, that's hands down. It stimulates both of them amazingly well. Amazingly well. All the data suggests that. If you feel your lats more than your biceps, does that mean that your biceps didn't get worked all of a sudden? Did it magically stop working your biceps? If your biceps cramp up and pump doing it and you don't feel your lats as much that time, does that mean that your lats didn't work? No, that doesn't, because that exercise works both of those muscles amazingly well. It's a great exercise for both muscles, particularly when you go through the full range of motion. If you do it from a dead hang and you go all the way up, it is hands down unarguably one of the best exercises ever invented for both muscles. The other one doesn't get worked less just because you feel it in one more. Do you know that on every single big compound that you do, you're going to feel more of the burn or the contraction in one muscle more than the other? It's simply going to happen even if both of them got worked to absolute failure, meaning you took both of those muscles to failure, to where they both gave out on the last rep. You're going to feel it dramatically more in one or the other. That doesn't mean the other one didn't get worked. It got taken to muscle failure. Believe me, it got fucking worked. But you may not feel it. Just like you may not feel the pulled muscle in your hand if someone stomps in your foot. That doesn't mean that trauma isn't still happening there. It doesn't mean it magically healed just because you don't feel it anymore. That's the thing with feeling these things. The brain registers those. It doesn't always mean that's what happened in the body. All right, it's not always an indicator of what really happened. That's what your brain is registering, and it's not always the best indicator in your conscious mind of where you're feeling pain, where you're feeling something work. The brain lies, and we know that from scientific studies. The brain lies. Doesn't matter that much. Now, when it comes to purely an isolation movement, when you're not doing a movement that works multiple muscle groups, you're doing a concentration curl. Does it become more important to feel the bicep on the concentration curl? Yes. The reason, you're probably doing the form stricter if you're feeling it more. All right, when people say they're getting a mind-muscle connection and feeling the connection on an isolation movement, that usually means that they're being stricter in their form. That's all it means. When you're focusing on feeling it, the only way you're going to feel it the most is if you remove other muscles from the equation a little more, right? That's how you're going to feel it. Or you've just worked harder on it. You've done more reps or added more weight. So you're going to feel more of a contraction on the bicep if you let the wrist trail behind just a little bit. Why is that? Because it takes the forearm out of it more. Now, if you use a lighter weight, does it mean that the bicep got worked more? Not automatically. It just means the forearm got worked less. So you might have to use a slightly lighter weight, but you're at least taking the forearm out. Now, whether that's a good or a bad thing, we could argue, but you're at least ensuring that most of the workload went to the muscle that you intended it to. But you know what? You could still build a big bicep without a strict curl. It's not necessary. But if your goal is to isolate a muscle, yeah, you probably want to feel a contraction in it more, but that doesn't mean that you created some magical connection in your brain. Your brain registers it more when your form gets stricter. Meaning, when you're doing this, you're going to feel the bicep more than when you swing a little bit, because the other muscles are helping with the work. Therefore, that load in your brain that it registers gets spread through a couple different areas. It gets a distorted signal, just like with the biceps and the lats. They're both working hard. It's going to pick which one it wants to feel more. For whatever reason. Doesn't mean that one worked more. But in this case, if you start removing the other muscles, yeah, you'll sometimes feel it more in that muscle that you're trying to target. Absolutely some truth to that. So if you're trying purely to isolate a muscle, yeah, you want to feel it, but you need to understand. You concentrate on feeling it more, and when you concentrate on feeling it more, you realize that you feel it more when you get stricter, so that's then what you're doing so that you can feel it more. It's not anything magical. It's not a mystical mind-muscle connection. It's just called using strict form. You feel it more with strict form. That's true of any isolation movement. But people try to treat that as if it's something mystical. No, man, it's just called using good form. That's what creates the mind-muscle connection. Good, clean technique where you're just moving one joint probably in your body and not cheating the weight up. That's all it is. So that's what you're feeling when you feel it in isolation. But when you start talking about compound movements, of comparing certain compound movements to isolation movements, no, you might have 2 or 3 muscles that got worked amazingly well, got worked enough to stimulate new muscle growth, and you might actually only really feel it in one of those 3 muscles. That's just the way it works, because your brain will pick and choose what it considers to be more important to recognize. Just like if you get a new pain in your foot, your brain stops caring about the pain in your hand or the pain in your head for a few seconds or a few minutes. Pain didn't go away, just that your brain registers it. Because ultimately the question you've got to ask, and again, it's understanding neurology, understanding the body. If you get stabbed in the foot, where do you feel the pain? No, you don't feel it in your foot. You feel it in your brain. Your brain is what picks up the pain. Your brain is what registers the pain. Your foot isn't capable of diagnosing pain. It just has sensors in there that your brain interprets, and there's a line up through those sensors, and just because you felt a pain in your foot doesn't even always mean that there was a pain in your foot. That could be something else crossing the line somewhere up the chain as well. But you felt the pain in your brain. That's where you interpret those things. And the brain doesn't always interpret things 100% accurately. So it's just a point you need to keep in mind. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.